To the module, putting students at the center, engaging social studies learning. We value your time and appreciate your active participation during this module. Here are a few suggested learning norms to make the most of your time. If possible, work in an environment with as few distractions as possible so you can engage and reflect, take notes and jot down ideas and questions as needed, and lastly, use this time wisely to ensure your professional learning with university instructors is productive. This module, learning objectives, why student-centered social studies matters, what student-centered learning looks like, instructional shifts, high-impact strategies with examples for grades 6 through 12, and a summary of learning. Here are the learning objectives for this module. By the end of this module, participants will be able to understand the what and why of student-centered learning in the social studies classroom, identify instructional shifts that increase engagement in the social studies classroom, and use instructional practices that allow for student-centered learning in social studies. Student-centered social studies matters because it engages students in meaningful learning, fosters critical thinking, and helps them connect classroom content to real-world communities and their roles as informed citizens. Let's dive deeper into this content. Let's start with a thought. Why should instructors focus on student-centered social studies? Well, social studies plays a crucial role in helping students understand how societies function, how decisions affect people and communities, and their own role as informed citizens. When learning is passive or disconnected from students' lives, engagement often declines, making it harder for them to see the relevance of what they are studying. Student-centered instruction addresses this by fostering curiosity, encouraging questioning, supporting active participation, and creating opportunities for meaningful learning experiences. By placing students at the center of the learning process, we help them connect more deeply with the content and understand the real-world implications of the topics they study. So what's the difference between traditional and student-centered instruction? Traditional social studies instruction is often instructor-led, textbook-driven, and emphasizes finding one right answer. In contrast, student-centered approaches focus on inquiry-driven learning, exploring multiple perspectives, and engaging students in discussion and analysis. By encouraging students to ask questions, consider different viewpoints, and think critically, student-centered learning helps them develop a deeper understanding of the content and its real-world relevance. The challenge with traditional approaches to social studies is they often heavily rely on textbooks and lectures, emphasizing memorization over analysis. These methods typically provide limited opportunities for discussion or inquiry, making it difficult for students to engage critically with the material. Assessments are often a one-size-fits-all, failing to capture individual student understanding or promote deeper thinking. And as a result, students may struggle to connect what they are learning to real-world context or to develop the skills needed for active, informed citizenship. Alternatively, in a student-centered social studies classroom, we move from passive to active learning. Passive learning often involves students listening to lectures and taking notes, with content and pacing selected by the instructor. Assessments tend to focus on recall, emphasizing memorization rather than understanding. In contrast, active learning engages students through questioning and investigation, collaborative discussion, and opportunities to apply their knowledge. This approach encourages deeper understanding, critical thinking, and meaningful connections to real-world context, making learning more relevant and memorable. Student-centered social studies builds deeper content understanding by encouraging students to actively explore and engage with the material. It strengthens reasoning and evidence-based thinking, helping students analyze information and support their conclusions. This approach also increases engagement and motivation, as students see the relevance to what they're learning. Additionally, it fosters civic literacy and empathy, preparing students to understand diverse perspectives and participate thoughtfully in their communities. Students are more engaged in social studies when learning connects to real-world issues, reflects diverse voices and experiences, and allows them to ask and investigate their own questions. By making content relevant and giving students ownership of their learning, we foster curiosity, critical thinking, and meaningful connections that extend beyond the classroom. Student-centered learning values the diverse backgrounds and experiences of all students, providing multiple ways to access content and engage with the material. It encourages every student's voice to be heard and ensures that participation is supported through structured strategies. By creating an inclusive and accessible learning environment, student-centered approaches help all learners actively contribute, think critically, and connect meaningfully with social studies content. Reflect. How does student-centered learning change the way students engage with social studies content? And in what ways can connecting lessons to real-world issues increase student motivation and understanding? Stop the video at this time to jot down your thoughts. Possible answers for number 1. Students become active participants rather than passive listeners. They ask questions, investigate topics, and think critically about content. Engagement increases because lessons are relevant to their interests and experiences. And students collaborate and discuss ideas, which deepens understanding. Possible responses for the second question. Students see the relevance of what they are learning to their own lives and communities. It encourages curiosity and personal investment in the topic. Students can apply knowledge to solve real-world problems, enhancing comprehension, and exposure to current events and diverse perspectives helps them understand multiple viewpoints and develop empathy. In this next section, we will take a closer look at what student-centered learning may look like in the classroom. Student-centered learning shifts the focus from the instructor to the students, giving them an active role in exploring content, asking questions, and engaging in meaningful discussion and analysis. Church social studies includes inquiry-based questions that spark curiosity and critical thinking, along with active learning experiences that engage students in exploring content heads-on. It emphasizes student voice and choice, allowing learners to guide their own investigations and express their perspectives. Additionally, authentic tasks and assessments connect learning to real-world contexts, helping students apply knowledge meaningfully and develop skills that extend beyond the classroom. Inquiry-based instruction begins with compelling, open-ended questions that do not have a single correct answer. These questions frame the entire unit and encourage students to analyze evidence, consider multiple perspectives, and revise their thinking over time. In secondary classrooms, inquiry questions help students move beyond what happened to why it mattered and how it connects today. These examples show how inquiry questions move beyond recall and push secondary students to think critically. In middle school, questions like, why do civilizations rise and fall, help students look for patterns across time and place. At the high school level, questions such as, did the New Deal expand or limit democracy, are intentionally debatable. Students must analyze evidence, consider multiple perspectives, and defend their conclusions. The key takeaway is that inquiry questions anchor the unit and keep students focused on meaning, not memorization. Active learning requires students to engage cognitively and socially with content. Rather than passively receiving information, students participate in discussions, simulations, and source analysis. These experiences mirror the work of historians, geographers, economists, and political scientists, helping students develop disciplinary skills while deepening content understanding. Active learning examples illustrate students engaging in the work of social scientists. When middle school students analyze artifacts or participate in a mock town hall, they practice interpreting evidence and civic discourse. High school simulations, such as constitutional debates or document-based questions, DBQs, investigations, require students to collaborate, reason, and support claims with sources. A DBQ asks students to analyze a set of primary and secondary sources and use evidence from those documents to construct a written argument or response. These activities increase cognitive demand and allow students to practice skills they will need beyond the classroom. Student voice is especially powerful at the secondary level because it increases motivation, ownership, and persistence with challenging tasks. When students are given opportunities to express evidence-based opinions, they are not just sharing personal views. They are practicing academic reasoning by selecting relevant evidence, justifying claims, and responding to different perspectives. Providing voice and choice does not lower expectations. Instead, it offers structured options with clear learning goals, such as choosing inquiry questions, case studies, or formats for demonstrating learning. This sense of agency increases engagement and often leads to greater rigor, as students are more invested in defending their thinking and deepening their understanding. These examples highlight how voice and choice can be structured and purposeful. In middle school, allowing students to choose a historical figure or project format increases engagement while still aligning to learning goals. In high school, choice becomes more sophisticated. Students may select which modern issue to investigate or which position to argue. In both cases, the instructor sets clear expectations, but students have agency in how they demonstrate understanding. Instructors can also give students the option to create their own project idea for approval, thus allowing for student voice. Authentic assessments ask students to apply their learning in meaningful ways. Instead of relying solely on tests, students complete tasks that resemble real-world civic and social studies work. These assessments emphasize argumentation, evidence, and communication, key skills for college, careers, and civic life. Tasks and assessments ask students to apply knowledge in meaningful contexts. Middle school examples, like writing a letter to a historical leader or creating a museum exhibit, help students communicate understanding in real-world formats. High school tasks, such as policy briefs or civic action plans, mirror the work of professionals and active citizens. These tasks and assessments emphasize reasoning, evidence, and communication, rather than simple recall. In student-centered social studies classrooms, instructors play a guiding role by designing learning experiences rather than just delivering lessons. They ask guiding and probing questions to spark curiosity and critical thinking, provide scaffolds and feedback to support all learners, and continuously monitor understanding to adjust instruction as needed. This approach helps ensure that students remain actively engaged and able to make meaningful connections with the content. So, what is the student's role again? Students actively participate in their learning by asking questions and seeking evidence to support their understanding. They analyze sources and consider multiple perspectives, engage in academic conversations with peers, and take ownership of their learning. This approach fosters critical thinking, collaboration, and a deeper connection to the content, helping students become thoughtful and informed citizens. Now we will watch a quick video of a social studies lesson designed to help educators see, study, and understand the differences between instructor-centered classrooms and student-centered classrooms. As you watch, reflect on what evidence from the video supports the idea that instruction should be student-centered and inquiry-based.
If you guys would please take out a piece of paper. All you need is a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil. Right, as you know, we just finished up a whole unit on the age of absolutism, absolute government. You wrote a short story, what it would be like if you had absolute power. You did projects with propaganda on absolute rulers during the time period. The next big unit that we're going to be covering is the age of revolution. The revolution, most specifically the French Revolution. So there's this time in between here with the question mark that how did we get from age of absolutism, absolute power, monarchs being in total and complete control, to where the citizens revolt. So how did that logically connect? So I want to ask you this, and I want you to write this down very quickly. Why do you think that revolution is the next big unit of study? What do you think, what do you know about, from what you have read and what you've studied and what you know about people, that if you have an absolute power, a dictator, an absolute monarch, why would revolution be a next unit of study? So just take a minute and think about that and jot that down on your paper. Okay, some of you might be completely finished writing it down. Some of you might still be finishing down, but you pretty much know what you think. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to share it with the person sitting next to you, why you think we're going from absolute power to revolution. What do you think about humans? So go ahead and talk, whether you're done writing or not. Go ahead and talk with your person. Whether you're done writing or not, go ahead and talk. It's just to get your things. Okay, guys, I want you guys to turn around and share it with the people behind you. Okay? Okay, you two.
Now that we have watched part of a social studies lesson, reflect on the following question. What evidence from the video supports the idea that instruction should be student-centered and inquiry-based? Stop the video to write down your thoughts. Possible answers. Students are actively engaged in discussions, not passively listening to lectures. Lessons are driven by meaningful questions rather than just content coverage. Students analyze sources, debate ideas, and justify their thinking with evidence. The instructor facilitates learning by guiding questions instead of giving answers. Students collaborate and learn from multiple perspectives, and learning tasks mirror real-world civic and historical thinking. To increase engagement and rigor in social studies, instruction must shift towards student-centered practices that emphasize inquiry, discussion, and critical thinking. Let's look at how we can achieve that in the classroom. Student-centered social studies shifts the focus from surface coverage to deep understanding, moving away from instructor talk towards student talk and active participation. It replaces worksheets with authentic tasks that connect learning to real-world context and moves beyond simple recall to reasoning and critical thinking. These shifts help students engage more meaningfully with the content, develop higher-order thinking skills, and see the relevance of social studies in their lives. Let's consider an example. A quick example and reflect. Instead of having students read a chapter about the civil rights movement and answer questions on a worksheet, coverage to recall, the instructor asks students to investigate primary sources such as speeches, photographs, and letters, moving from understanding to reasoning. Students work in groups to analyze these sources and discuss different perspectives, instructor talk to student talk, then create a presentation or digital story that connects the historical events to modern social justice issues, worksheets to authentic tasks. How does analyzing primary sources and creating an authentic project help students better understand the civil rights movement compared to just reading a textbook and completing a worksheet? Stop the video to reflect. Here are some possible responses you may have considered. Primary sources make history more real and meaningful. Authentic projects develop critical thinking and reasoning. Students connect past events to modern issues. And learning becomes engaging, interactive, and memorable. Student-centered environments are built on norms that encourage respectful discussion, helping students feel safe to share their ideas and listen to others. They include clear expectations for collaboration so all learners can contribute meaningfully to group work, Additionally, these environments provide structures that support risk-taking and inquiry, allowing students to ask questions, explore different perspectives, and engage deeply with content without the fear of failure. Let's look at another example. In a high school government class, students participate in a debate about whether schools should implement a 4-day school week. Before the activity, the instructor establishes norms for respectful discussion, such as listening without interrupting and supporting opinions with evidence. Clear expectations for collaboration are provided, including assigned roles like researcher, presenter, and note taker. The instructor also scaffolds the discussion with guiding questions and prompts, creating a safe space for students to take intellectual risks, consider multiple perspectives, and engage deeply with the topic. How do norms, clear collaboration expectations, and structured supports help students engage in meaningful discussion and take risks in exploring different perspectives? Pause the video to reflect. In student-centered classrooms, norms for respectful discussion help create a safe space where students feel comfortable sharing ideas and listening to others. Clear expectations for collaboration guide students in contributing meaningfully to group work. Structured supports, such as guiding questions or scaffolds, encourage critical thinking and allow students to take intellectual risks. Together, these elements foster active engagement, deeper understanding, and a learning environment where students can explore multiple perspectives with confidence. Monitoring learning goes beyond traditional quizzes or tests. Instructors use ongoing formative checks, such as observing discussions and reviewing student work, to gauge understanding in real time. Student self-reflection is also an important tool, helping learners assess their own thinking and progress. Feedback focuses on reasoning and critical thinking, not just whether answers are right or wrong. Together, these strategies allow instructors to adjust instruction, provide targeted support, and ensure that all students are actively engaged in meaningful learning. Here's another example. In a U.S. history class, students analyze the causes of the Civil War in small groups. The instructor observes group discussions about economic, political, and social factors to assess student understanding. Students complete quick self-reflection prompts about what they learned and any questions they still have. The instructor provides feedback that emphasizes reasoning. For example, asking students to explain how different factors were connected, rather than just confirming if their answers are correct. How does ongoing observation, self-reflection, and feedback focused on reasoning help students better understand complex historical events? Stop the video once more to write down your thoughts. Here are some possible responses you may have also written down. Observation of discussions reveals different perspectives and possible misconceptions. Self-reflection helps students identify what they know and what they still need to learn. Feedback focused on reasoning encourages critical thinking and connections between ideas. And these strategies make learning more meaningful and actively engage students with the content. Shift towards student-centered instruction. Instructors ask themselves a different set of questions about learning, moving beyond whether students memorize content to whether they can explain, analyze, and apply what they know. Instead of asking, can students recall the content? Instructors ask, can students explain, analyze, and apply what they learned? This approach emphasizes reasoning, critical thinking, and the ability to use knowledge in meaningful ways. It encourages students to make connections, engage actively with content, and demonstrate learning through authentic tasks rather than simple recollection. Let's take another moment to reflect. How do inquiry-based questions and active learning experiences change the way students engage with social studies content? How can norms, collaboration expectations, and structured supports create a safe environment for risk-taking and critical thinking? Stop the video to write down your thoughts. Possible answers for the first question: students become active participants, asking questions and exploring topics deeply. Engagement increases because learning is relevant and connected to real-world issues. Students develop critical thinking and reasoning skills instead of just memorizing facts. Or collaboration and discussion allow students to hear multiple perspectives and refine their ideas. Possible answers for the second question: norms for respectful discussion help students feel comfortable sharing their ideas. Clear expectations for collaboration ensure that all students contribute meaningfully. Structured supports, such as scaffolds or guiding questions, provide guidance and reduce anxiety. Or students are more willing to take intellectual risks, explore new perspectives, and engage deeply with the content. Now that we understand what student-centered learning is and what it may look like, let's look at some specific strategies that were mentioned and dive deeper so that you can implement them in your own classroom or small groups. Here are the high-impact strategies we will cover more deeply in this section: inquiry-based learning, discussion and student voice, and choice and authentic tasks. We previously presented information on inquiry-based questions, so this serves as a quick review. In student-centered social studies, learning is driven by meaningful questions that spark curiosity and guide inquiry. Students analyze sources and evidence to form their own understanding, rather than simply receiving information from the instructor. The emphasis shifts from memorizing facts to explaining ideas, making connections, and using reasoning to support conclusions. This approach encourages critical thinking, active engagement, and a deeper understanding of the content. Of inquiry-based social studies is a progression of questions that guide learning and deepen understanding. Compelling questions are broad and thought-provoking, designed to spark curiosity and guide the overall focus of a unit. Supporting questions help structure the investigation, providing direction while still allowing for exploration. And student-generated questions give learners ownership of their learning, encouraging them to pursue areas of personal interest and engage deeply with the content. Together, these types of questions foster inquiry, critical thinking, and meaningful engagement in social studies. Inquiry engages students through meaningful, thought-provoking questions that drive exploration and reasoning. For example, in middle school grades, students might explore: how did different perspectives and events contribute to the outbreak of the American Revolution? This encourages them to consider multiple causes, analyze perspectives, and use evidence to develop their own conclusions. In high school, a question such as, how should governments respond to social inequality, prompts students to examine politics, historical examples, and ethical considerations. By framing learning around these compelling questions, students practice critical thinking, reasoning, and evidence-based discussion while connecting historical content to broader social issues. The key takeaway is compelling questions make learning active and meaningful, helping students construct understanding rather than simply recall facts. Here's another classroom scenario. In a 7th grade history class, the instructor poses the question, was the American Revolution inevitable? Students are divided into small groups and given primary sources, such as letters, newspaper articles, and excerpts from political documents of the time. Each group analyzes the sources, identifies different perspectives, and discusses possible causes and consequences. Students then share their conclusions in a gallery walk, comparing and contrasting their findings with other groups. The instructor circulates, asking probing questions to deepen thinking and guide discussion. Finally, students write an answer to the original question independently, using evidence from the documents and gallery walk to support their answer. How can you use compelling questions and inquiry-based strategies to increase student engagement and promote deeper understanding in your classroom? Stop the video to jot down your thoughts. Questions and inquiry-based strategies transforms the classroom into a space where students are actively engaged in learning. These questions spark curiosity and encourage students to explore topics more deeply, while giving them ownership of their learning through inquiry-based activities. Students develop critical thinking skills as they analyze evidence and make connections to real-world issues. Collaborative projects and discussions provide opportunities to share perspectives, reason with evidence, and engage meaningfully with content. This approach fosters both deeper understanding and lasting engagement. Discussion and student voice are also key components of student-centered social studies. Encouraging multiple perspectives allows students to see issues from different viewpoints, promoting empathy and deeper understanding. By requiring evidence-based reasoning, students learn to support their ideas with facts, primary sources, or data rather than opinions alone. Additionally, these discussions build essential communication and listening skills, as students must articulate their thoughts clearly, respond to peers respectively, and consider alternative viewpoints. This combination helps students engage more meaningfully with content and develop critical skills for civic participation. To foster effective discussion and student voice, instructors need to establish clear norms and expectations for how students engage with one another. Providing sentence stems and prompts can help students articulate their ideas more clearly, while accountable talk strategies guide respectful, evidence-based dialogue. It's also important to ensure that all students participate, giving everyone a chance to contribute and hear multiple perspectives. These strategies create a structured environment where meaningful discussion and critical thinking can thrive. Discussion starters are prompts or questions designed to spark student thinking, encourage dialogue, and help learners engage meaningfully with the content. Let's look at one. Four corners is a strategy where each corner of the classroom is designated as a possible answer to a statement or opinion. Students then physically move to the corner that best represents their stance on the statement or opinion. This makes thinking visible and encourages all students to engage. For middle school social studies, you might use a statement like, "The American Revolution was inevitable." Students select a corner based on their viewpoint, then discuss their reasoning with evidence. After sharing, they can listen to other perspectives, reconsider their position, or expand their thinking. This strategy promotes evidence-based discussion, perspective taking, and active engagement, all while giving students a low-risk way to share ideas in a structured environment. Let's look at another example. Socratic Seminar is a student-led discussion exploring open-ended questions using evidence and respectful dialogue. An example, high school students debate, how should governments respond to social inequity? Using historical and current examples. This strategy promotes critical thinking, collaboration, and deeper understanding. Philosophical chairs is another effective strategy for promoting discussion, critical thinking, and evidence-based reasoning in social studies. In philosophical chairs, students take a position on a question, support it with evidence, listen to opposing views, and may change their stance as their thinking evolves. For example, high school students might debate, the government should implement universal basic income, presenting evidence, responding to peers, and engaging in respectful dialogue. Philosophical chairs is about advocating a position, while Socratic Seminar is about inquiry and collaborative thinking. Both strategies promote critical thinking and communication skills, but the approach and mindset students take are different. Building on discussion strategies that encourage student voice and reasoning, another way to engage learners is through small group source analysis. In this strategy, students work collaboratively to examine primary and secondary sources, identify perspectives, and draw evidence-based conclusions. Middle school example would be students might analyze letters, speeches, and newspaper articles from the civil rights movement. In small groups, they discuss interpretations, evaluate different viewpoints, and then present their findings to the class. This approach promotes critical thinking, collaboration, and historical reasoning. while allowing students to practice analyzing evidence in a structured, supportive setting. Providing students with choice is a key component of student-centered learning. Choice can include the topics or questions students investigate, the sources or materials they use, the pathways they follow to explore content, and the format or type of their final product. Allowing students to make decisions about their learning increases engagement, motivation, and ownership, and encourages them to connect more deeply with the content. By offering meaningful options, instructors support diverse learning styles and interests while fostering creativity and critical thinking. Note too that a choice can always be for the student to design their own task, which allows for voice. Authentic tasks engage students by mirroring real-world civic or historical work. These tasks require analysis, problem solving, and decision making, moving beyond simple recall or rote activities. The outcome is a meaningful product or action, such as a project, presentation, or proposal that demonstrates students' understanding and allows them to apply their learning in practical, relevant ways. Authentic tasks make learning more engaging and help students see the relevance of social studies to their lives and communities. These are some ways students can demonstrate their understanding in social studies beyond a traditional paper or test. Notice that the options allow for different learning styles and skills: creative, analytical, and communicative. For example, students could create a public service announcement combining research with persuasive media. They might produce a short documentary or video, which encourages storytelling and digital literacy. Another option is to host a classroom debate or panel discussion, promoting critical thinking and oral communication. Or they could develop a digital timeline or infographic, helping them organize information visually and chronologically. The goal is to give students choice and ownership, while also letting them apply their knowledge in meaningful, real-world ways. This also allows you to assess understanding in diverse, authentic ways. Thinking, how can this look for learners with different learning styles and/or barriers? Supporting all learners in student-centered social studies requires intentional scaffolds and guidance. Instructors can scaffold inquiry and discussion by providing guiding questions, sentence stems, or structured protocols that help students engage meaningfully. Providing models and exemplars demonstrates expectations and illustrates how to approach tasks or analyze sources. Offering flexible supports, such as differentiated resources, checklists, or collaborative structures, ensures that all students can participate fully while maintaining academic rigor. These strategies help create an inclusive classroom where every student has the opportunity to succeed and engage deeply with the content. Supporting all learners in student-centered social studies means providing scaffolds and guidance that help students engage meaningfully while maintaining rigor. For middle school, students investigating the causes of the French Revolution can benefit from graphic organizers to analyze multiple perspectives and sentence stems to support discussion. In high school, students designing a city zoning proposal in a government class can use exemplar plans and research checklists as scaffolds while still meeting high expectations for evidence-based reasoning. These strategies ensure that all learners can participate fully, think critically, and produce meaningful work. It's one final time. How can strategies like Four Corners, Socratic Seminar, and philosophical chairs increase student engagement and critical thinking in your classroom? How might these high-impact strategies change the way students demonstrate understanding compared to traditional methods? Stop the video to write down your answers. Possible answers for the first question: encourage active participation and collaboration, promote discussion of multiple perspectives, require students to support ideas with evidence and reasoning, and foster deepening understanding through reflection and dialogue. Possible responses for question 2: students move from memorization to reasoning and analysis, Learning is demonstrated through discussion, debate, and authentic tasks. Students take ownership of their learning and articulate their understanding, and provides opportunities to apply knowledge to real-world contexts. We have covered a lot of content, so let's quickly review. Student-centered social studies increases engagement, relevance, and deeper understanding by putting students at the center of their learning. Shifting from instructor-led instruction to inquiry, discussion, and collaborative activities helps students develop critical thinking and civic skills. Providing opportunities for student voice and choice supports equity and ensures meaningful participation for all learners. Strategies such as inquiry-based questions, discussion protocols, and authentic tasks can be implemented at every grade level, from middle school to high school. Even small instructional shifts, like offering choice, using primary sources, or facilitating structured discussions, can lead to significant gains in student engagement, understanding, and skill development. We hope you enjoyed this module on putting students at the center, engaging social studies learning. Please complete the check for understanding and the survey included in the Google Classroom. Thank you, and we look forward to providing continued support for your professional growth at University Instructors.